Welcome to Rescue Paws Stories, your go-to place for heartwarming and emotional humans and animals stories. Part 1. The Bark That Shook the Neighborhood. It was a quiet Sunday morning in the sleepy town of Willow Creek, where time seemed to slow, and the loudest sound most days was the wind brushing gently through the oak trees. In a modest, ivy-wrapped house near the end of Maple Lane, an old dog named Jasper lay peacefully in the sun-soaked corner of his fenced backyard. With a graying snout, cloudy eyes, and a limp in his back leg, Jasper had seen better days. But he was content. This backyard had been his world for nearly 14 years, filled with memories of stick-chasing, tail-wagging, and gentle evenings curled beside the man he loved most in the world, his owner, Thomas Caldwell. Thomas was a retired fireman, a man of quiet strength who had adopted Jasper as a pup the day after his wife passed away. Together, they'd rebuilt each other, filling the silence in one another's lives with loyalty and love. Jasper had grown old in that backyard, just like Thomas had grown old watching him. Every morning, without fail, Thomas would set out a bowl of warm oatmeal and sit with Jasper under the porch awning, humming old jazz songs, while the world slowly woke. But this morning would be different. The trouble began with a new neighbor. A woman named Dana Kestler had moved in just 2 houses down, bringing with her a pristine lawn, 2 anxious Pomeranians, and a low tolerance for noise. At precisely 7:15 a.m., Jasper barked once, a low, hoarse bark, not of threat, but of habit. Dana, startled from her morning yoga, immediately called the non-emergency police line to report a dangerous animal disturbing the peace. Less than 15 minutes later, 2 uniformed officers arrived. Jasper, startled by the crunch of boots on gravel, rose slowly to his feet. His tail wagged once before he lowered his head, a gentle old soul, curious but cautious. But the officers didn't see an elderly dog with tired bones and a loyal heart. They saw teeth. They saw scars from his firefighter rescue days. And they saw the report: aggressive, dangerous canine behavior. One officer unlatched the gate and stepped inside. Jasper growled softly, not out of aggression, but uncertainty. He backed away slowly, limping, confused. The younger officer drew his baton. "Hey, easy," the older one said. But his tone wasn't warning. It was eager, as if he too expected a threat. They advanced. Jasper cowered, ears down, tail between his legs. He barked again, a warning now, a plea. And then the first blow came. The crack of the baton against the chain-link fence echoed through the yard. Jasper yelped, slipping on the grass, scrambling toward the back of the yard. "Come on, old mutt, we'll see how dangerous you really are," one of them muttered, lifting the gate wider. That's when the side gate banged open, and a deep voice cut through the air like thunder. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Thomas Caldwell stood there, back straight despite the cane in his hand, fire in his eyes, his chest heaving with fury. And in that single moment, everything began to change. Part 2. The Fireman's Wrath. Thomas Caldwell's voice, though aged, struck the officers like a thunderclap. Both men froze where they stood, caught mid-step in Jasper's yard, as the old dog huddled beneath a wooden bench, sides heaving with panic. His soft whines filled the silence between them. The younger officer lowered his baton slowly, as if reality had only just returned to him. The older one straightened his uniform, attempting to recover the dignity that had vanished the moment Thomas appeared. Thomas didn't wait for an explanation. He stormed forward, ignoring the pain in his knees, cane tapping with every furious step. "Move!" he growled, eyes locked on the officer closest to Jasper. "Sir, we received a complaint," the younger one began. "A complaint?" Thomas snapped. "So you come into my yard, uninvited, Raise a weapon at a blind, arthritic dog and call that procedure? That dog has served this town longer than either of you." The younger officer, shifting nervously, looked to his partner for backup. The older one didn't flinch. "Sir, the animal was reported as dangerous. We were just responding to protocol." "Protocol doesn't involve cornering a harmless old dog and threatening him," Thomas fired back, his voice trembling now, not with weakness but with a restrained fury. "You see this?" He pointed to Jasper's left side, where a faint burn scar ran along the fur. "That's from a fire in 2014. Jasper went into a burning apartment with me and dragged out a toddler before the building collapsed. You'd know that if you knew anything about this town, or the heroes in it." The officers were silent. Jasper whimpered softly, trying to rise, and Thomas immediately dropped to one knee beside him. The old man cradled the dog's muzzle gently, running his hand over the familiar grizzled fur. "I've got you, boy. I'm here." The bond between them was so palpable, so deeply rooted in time and pain and healing, that even the officers couldn't deny its power. Still, the older cop spoke again, softer this time. "Sir, we understand you're upset, but we were just following a complaint. The woman said she felt threatened." Thomas shook his head slowly, anger giving way to heartbreak. "Jasper barks once and she calls the police? What kind of neighborhood is this becoming? We used to know our neighbors. We used to ask questions before reaching for the phone." Just then, the side gate creaked open again. A new voice called out, "What's going on here?" It was Martha Dempsey from across the street, a retired nurse in her 70s, holding a leash in one hand and a warm coffee mug in the other. Behind her came George, a local mailman off duty, and then Nora Barnes, a high school teacher who often brought Jasper leftover pot roast on Sundays. One by one, neighbors began filtering in, faces familiar with Jasper, hearts softened by years of watching him grow old and gentle. And when they saw the dog trembling under the bench, their expressions changed from confusion to outrage. "You harassed Jasper?" Martha asked, stunned. "He's the gentlest soul on this street," George said, folding his arms. "He's never even chased a squirrel." "Shameful," Nora muttered, eyes hard on the officers. "Truly shameful." In a matter of minutes, the story had changed. No longer was it about a so-called dangerous dog. It was about a beloved community member, the four-legged kind, being harassed in the very yard where he'd once been a hero. The younger officer cleared his throat. "We'll file a report. We didn't mean any harm." "Get out," Thomas said quietly. They hesitated. "I said get out of my yard," he repeated, louder this time. "Before I call the chief myself, he owes me more than a few favors." And with that, the officers turned and exited without another word. Thomas turned back to Jasper, who now leaned against him with a heavy sigh, tail giving a weak but thankful wag. The crowd gathered closer, murmurs of support filling the air. But as Thomas helped Jasper to his feet and the neighbors rallied around them, he couldn't shake the feeling gnawing in his chest. Something was off about this. Something deeper. And this wasn't the last time someone would come for Jasper. Not by a long shot. Part 3. A strange knock at midnight. The neighborhood had returned to an uneasy calm, but Thomas Caldwell's mind had not. He sat in his kitchen that night, a steaming mug of chamomile tea in hand, the soft tick of the wall clock the only sound besides Jasper's slow breathing by the back door. The old dog lay on his favorite blanket, eyes half closed, but ears twitching now and then, still unsettled. Just like Thomas, the entire day had felt wrong. The officer's aggressive entrance, the way they'd handled Jasper like a threat without hesitation, and even the woman's complaint. It all stirred something deep inside Thomas, a memory he couldn't quite grab, a feeling he couldn't shake. For all his years on the force as a firefighter and the deep respect he held for first responders, something about today's visit hadn't followed protocol. And he would know. As the moon reached its peak and the streets fell quiet, a knock came at the front door. 3 soft taps. Thomas stiffened. Midnight was not the hour for neighbors or friends. He grabbed his cane and rose, glancing down at Jasper. The dog was awake now, head lifted, alert. A low growl rumbled in his chest. Not fear. Warning. Thomas opened the door slowly. On his porch stood a woman, tall, late 30s, wearing a black windbreaker and holding a manila envelope. Her eyes were sharp, focused, and her voice was low but urgent. "Mr. Caldwell." "Yes?" "My name is Dr. Elaine Porter. I'm a veterinarian. I run the local shelter and animal control advisory board." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "What are you doing here at this hour?" "I didn't want to be seen coming to your house in the daytime," she replied quickly. "I saw what happened this morning. I wasn't supposed to. But I was walking back from a late appointment when I saw the officers entering your yard. They weren't supposed to engage the animal. They didn't even have the right paperwork." Thomas blinked. "So it wasn't a standard call." She handed him the envelope. "Number, it wasn't a call at all. That woman, Dana Kestler. She didn't just move here randomly. She works for a private firm that specializes in animal control legislation, and she's been involved in several questionable petitions to remove long-standing pets from neighborhoods under nuisance pretenses. They use small violations to get dogs labeled as dangerous, then quietly euthanized." Thomas felt his blood run cold. "You're saying this was deliberate?" "I believe Jasper is on a list," Dr. Porter said solemnly. "A list targeting older dogs with medical needs or behavioral quirks. They make it look legal. They flood city councils with fabricated complaints, build a false paper trail, and use city resources to remove animals permanently. It saves municipalities money. No vet bills, no shelter costs." Thomas gripped the edge of the door. "That's sick." "I agree. But it's happening. And today was only a warning shot. They tested your response. If you hadn't been home..." She let the thought hang in the air. Thomas looked back at Jasper, who sat silently by the door now, watching. "Not my boy," he whispered. "Not while I'm alive." Dr. Porter reached into her jacket. "That's why I'm here. Inside this envelope are names, records, evidence. I've been building a case quietly, but I need help. I need people who care. People like you. If we don't expose them, more dogs like Jasper will vanish, and no one will even know why." Thomas took the envelope slowly. His hands shook, not from fear, but from awakening. The fire that had once helped him charge into burning buildings was back. "You have my help," he said firmly. "Whatever you need." "We're not letting them take another animal." Just then, headlights swept past the house. A black SUV slowed as it passed the porch, then sped up and disappeared into the night. They weren't just being watched. The game had already begun. Part 4. They're watching us. The next morning brought no peace. Thomas woke before the sun, though he'd barely slept. His thoughts kept looping through the midnight meeting, Doctor. Porter's urgent words, and the black SUV that had passed like a shadow with eyes. Jasper was restless too, pacing the house more than usual, nose to the floor, tail lowered. Even in old age, dogs knew when something was off. Thomas sat in his workshop, the manila envelope from Doctor. Porter open on the table before him. Inside were names, incident reports, blurry photographs and maps. Dozens of red dots marked homes like his across the state. Each dot was a house where an elderly pet had suddenly been accused, seized, or quietly removed. Some of the reports claimed barking complaints. Others cited potential aggression. But nearly all ended with the same phrase: euthanized under city ordinance. Thomas's stomach turned. He reached for his old rotary phone, dialed a number from memory, and waited. After a few rings, a gruff voice answered. "Caldwell?" "Been years." "Frank, I need a favor," Thomas said, "and I wouldn't ask if it weren't serious." Frank Bishop had been a detective before retirement, a quiet man who never chased headlines, but always chased the truth. "Tell me everything," he said. An hour later, Frank arrived with a thermos of coffee and a skeptical eye. But once Thomas spread out the documents and shared what Dr. Porter had revealed, skepticism turned to stone-cold anger. "They're privatizing animal control under the table," Frank muttered, "using fake complaints to clean out liabilities. Jesus. And the cops who showed up here. You remember their badge numbers?" "I do better than that," Thomas said, walking over to his dusty security cabinet. He flipped on an old analog system, something he'd once installed as a fire precaution, but had long since forgotten. The cameras in the yard still work. They caught the whole thing. On screen, they watched the two officers trespass without announcement. No warning, no warrant, just brute intimidation. One of them even raised a baton at Jasper before Thomas appeared and de-escalated the situation. Frank leaned in. "I know that one. Officer Brent Lively. He was suspended 2 years ago for excessive force on a traffic stop. How is he even back on duty?" Thomas's eyes narrowed. "You think he's in on it?" "I think they're using rogue officers who don't ask questions." Frank pulled out a notepad. "We're not going to stop this just by yelling louder. We need to get loud in the right places. Press council meetings, lawyers. If we expose this as coordinated abuse, even the council will have to act." Just then, a loud thump hit the front porch. Thomas jumped up and opened the door. A brick lay on the step, wrapped in newspaper and rubber bands. Unwrapping it revealed a crudely written note in thick black marker. "Back off, or the dog dies next time." Behind him, Jasper stood, growling. Thomas didn't flinch. He looked at Frank, fire in his veins. "They want war?" Frank stood up slowly. "Then they picked the wrong house."